All right, so let's dive into Hamlet.
Okay.
Act 4, Scene 5.
Sounds good.
One of the most haunting scenes in the play.
Definitely.
Ophelia's descent into madness after her father's death.
Mm.
This scene is just packed with symbolism and layers of meaning. The kind of stuff that sparks some really interesting classroom discussions.
Yeah, for sure. It's a turning point in the play. We see
Yeah.
the impact of Polonius's murder kind of ripple outward, and it really throws the court into chaos.
Right, and remember, Hamlet's absent from this scene, right? He's been shipped off to England.
Right.
So we're getting this view of Ophelia's breakdown through the eyes of others.
Yeah.
Like even before she enters,
Mm-hmm.
a gentleman describes her as distraught, speaking things in doubt.
Mm.
He even says, her speech is nothing, yet the unshaped use of it doth move the hearers to collection.
Wow.
Now that's Shakespearean language for you. What do you think he's getting at here?
Well, her speech is nothing, meaning it's fragmented, nonsensical, but it's that very lack of coherence that forces the people around her to try and piece together meaning. They're compelled to find sense in her badness, which is fascinating because it suggests that maybe there's a truth hidden beneath the surface.
Almost like she's tapping into something they can't quite grasp.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there are the songs.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, chills every time.
Mm-hmm.
Lost love, death, a broken promise of marriage. It's a lot to process.
It is.
They seem so random at first, almost like Shakespeare just threw them in for emotional effect.
Right.
But, he's deliberate with every word.
Yeah.
What kind of questions should students be asking about these songs?
Well, think about the context of each song.
Okay.
For example, how should I, your true love, know? Could be tied to Hamlet's rejection? Or maybe even echoing Polonius's earlier advice to her about men being deceptive?
Interesting.
It's like a fractured memory resurfacing in this jumble of grief.
And then there's, he is dead and gone, lady.
Yeah.
Is Ophelia subconsciously predicting Hamlet's demise?
Yeah.
Or is it a manifestation of her own desire for escape? Or is it more directly tied to her father's death, a raw expression of grief?
Yeah, exactly.
So many possibilities.
It's open to interpretation, which is what makes it so ripe for discussion.
Right.
And don't
Yeah.
forget about tomorrow is Saint Valentine's Day.
Right.
Lost innocence, lost love, possibly even a broken promise of marriage.
Right.
All those themes swirling around.
That one always gets to me.
Yeah.
It's so poignant and layered.
It is.
Okay, so we've got these fragmented speeches and these haunting songs, and then she enters scattering flowers.
Right.
Rosemary for remembrance, pansies for thoughts, rue for sorrow. She even says she's wearing her rue with a difference. Now, this is where things get really symbolic.
Definitely.
What's Shakespeare doing here with this language of flowers?
Well, remember in Elizabethan times, flowers held specific meanings.
Right.
So it's not just a random assortment. Ophelia's distributing these flowers almost like she's assigning them meaning in relation to the recipients. It's a powerful visual representation of her mental state, but it's also loaded with potential interpretations.
So, for instance, why rosemary for the queen,
Right.
given their complex relationship?
Exactly.
Does the rosemary symbolize a genuine act of remembrance, or is there something more barbed in the gesture?
Exactly. And she gives rue the herb of regret and sorrow to both the king and queen.
Okay.
But she pointedly mentions wearing her rue with a difference. Is this highlighting her unique grief distinct from theirs? Or is she perhaps suggesting they too should be wearing rue, that they have something to regret?
Wow.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Definitely a lot to discuss in class.
For sure.
Now, right on the heels of this,
Yeah.
her brother Laertes bursts in demanding answers about his father's death.
Right.
His reaction to Ophelia's madness is so visceral.
It is.
We see this mix of anger and tenderness, or a raw outpouring of emotion. What do you think Shakespeare is contrasting here with Laertes' entrance?
Well, it's a stark contrast to Hamlet's more introspective intellectual approach to grief.
Right.
Laertes is all action demanding justice. He's a foil to Hamlet in many ways, and their different responses to loss really highlight the play's central themes.
And of course, Claudius sees an opportunity in Laertes' rage.
Oh, yeah.
He promises justice, offering to jointly labor with your soul to find peace.
Right.
But how much of that is genuine, and how much is just Claudius being his manipulative self?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
Claudius is a master manipulator, so it's hard to know what's genuine and what's calculated.
Yeah.
But there are clues in his language, the way he frames his promises, that might reveal his true intentions.
For sure. Students should definitely be paying close attention to how Claudius uses language to control those around him.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting, because that moment where Claudius steps in to manipulate Laertes,
Right.
it's so crucial to the play's trajectory. It really sets the stage for that final act, which is just full of intrigue and sadly tragedy.
It's like that calm before the storm, right?
Yeah.
Claudius is like the ultimate chess player, always thinking a few steps ahead.
Right.
And poor Hamlet, he's off in England,
Mhm.
so completely unaware of what's brewing back home.
And that dramatic irony
Right.
is so key to Shakespeare's work.
Yeah,
The audience, we know Claudius is the one who actually killed Polonius,
right.
but Laertes doesn't.
Yeah.
So we watch as Claudius, this master manipulator, seizes on Laertes' anger to further his own aims.
It's almost like he's weaving a web, ensnaring everyone in his schemes.
Yeah.
And Ophelia, in her madness, becomes a pawn in this game.
Precisely, her madness, while tragic, is also a potent dramatic device.
Okay.
It exposes the hypocrisy and rot at the heart of the court.
Interesting.
Think about it. She's manipulated by her father, rejected by Hamlet,
Right.
and ultimately driven to madness by the actions of these powerful men.
It's heartbreaking, especially when you consider that she's one of the most innocent characters in the play.
Yeah.
She's caught in this web of deceit and violence, and she simply can't cope.
And that raises questions about the treatment of women in Elizabethan society, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
Ophelia's agency is so limited.
Oh,
She's
yeah.
denied the opportunity to speak for herself, to seek justice, or even to grieve properly. Her fate really highlights the constraints placed upon women in that era.
It's a good reminder that while we're studying these plays, it's important to remember the historical context.
Absolutely. Now, shifting gears a bit.
Okay.
Let's talk about how this scene sets up the final act.
Right.
Claudius, always the schemer, sees Laertes' anger as a way to finally dispose of Hamlet.
Okay.
He proposes this fencing match, but with a deadly twist.
Uh-oh.
He wants Laertes to use a poisoned sword.
That's cold. And it makes you think, doesn't it? What if Ophelia had lived in a different time? A time where mental illness was understood and treated with compassion. Could her fate have been different? Could she have found some kind of agency, a way to escape the machinations of the court?
That's a fascinating question.
It is.
It challenges us to think beyond the confines of the play and consider how societal structures impact individual lives.
Yeah.
Shakespeare, though, writing centuries ago, taps into these universal human experiences.
Right.
Grief, betrayal, madness
Yeah.
that resonate across time. And that's what makes his work so enduring, so relevant, even today.
It's a lot to ponder. But before we get too lost in the philosophical weeds, let's get back to the action.
Okay.
So we've got this poisoned fencing match set up. And of course, poor Hamlet, he's totally oblivious to the danger he's walking into.
Right.
But we, the audience, we know what's coming,
Yeah.
which adds this incredible layer of tension.
It's that classic Shakespearean dramatic irony at work again.
It is.
And the consequences are devastating, as we know, not just for Hamlet, but for so many others caught in the crossfire.
Yeah.
Gertrude Laertes, even Claudius himself.
It's a real bloodbath, a
Mhm.
tragic ending for so many characters.
Yeah, it really makes you think about the nature of revenge, doesn't it? How it consumes those who seek it, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Yeah. It's a powerful theme that runs throughout the play. And it's not just about physical violence. Think about how Claudius uses words as weapons, manipulating Laertes and others to achieve his goals.
That's a great point. It's like that poison that's literally present in the play also acts as a metaphor for the corruption and deceit that have infected the court. Everyone's poisoned in some way, whether it's by their own ambitions, their grief, or the actions of others.
Exactly. And it's that pervasive sense of corruption that ultimately leads to the tragic downfall of so many characters. But stepping back from the grand themes for a moment, there's also a lot to be said for the way Shakespeare uses language in this scene, especially in Ophelia's speeches and songs. Students don't just gloss over those words, really dive into the imagery, the metaphors, the wordplay. There's a wealth of meaning to uncover there.
It's like each line is a puzzle waiting to be deciphered. And I think that's one of the things that makes Hamlet so endlessly fascinating. Every time you read it or see it performed, you discover something new.
Absolutely, and there's no one right way to interpret it. The beauty of Shakespeare is that it invites multiple perspectives, encourages discussion and debate. So if you're grappling with Hamlet in class, don't feel intimidated. Embrace the ambiguity, ask questions, and come to your own conclusions.
That's such great advice. Don't be afraid to get creative, too. What if you were directing this scene? How would you stage Ophelia's entrance? What kind of music would you use to underscore her songs? How would you convey her fragile mental state to a modern audience?
Those are great questions to consider. And remember, even though Hamlet was written centuries ago, it still speaks to us today. It explores themes of grief, betrayal, madness, ambition, universal human experiences that transcend time and place.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Act 4, Scene 5, I think the key takeaway here is this. Hamlet is a play that rewards close reading and thoughtful analysis. Don't shy away from the difficult questions. Engage with the text, think critically, and let those ideas simmer. You might be surprised at what you discover.
Well said. And who knows, maybe your exploration of the scene will spark a lifelong love of Shakespeare. There's a whole world of language and ideas waiting to be discovered in his work,